the Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Breaking History, where I'm always happy to be joined with my co-host, Gordon, a.k.a. Ghost of Based Patrick Henry. How are you doing, Gordon?
I'm awesome, Matt. How are you today?
I'm doing okay, man. I'm doing all right. We got a lot to talk about. We got occult, satanic, underground operations trying to instigate war with Russia and the USA and kill Trump. We've got questions about Serbian overthrows, regime change right now, and whether leaders of Europe should be allowed to continue to be leaders of Europe if they want to also be friends with Putin and celebrate the destruction of a Nazi one world government back in the 1940s, which was what will be celebrated on May 9th and Victory Day in Russia. That's another thing. I know we've got questions like, should Muslim countries be allowed to have civilian nuclear power? Should they be allowed such things? So we'll talk about maybe some U.S.-China relations. We'll talk about a lot. But I think before we do anything, how about a word from today's sponsor, which is us, actually. It's GART. Let me just read a thing. I'll read today's first announcement, okay? There's something happening on May 1st to May 4th. GART, Badlands, the great... Oh, here it is. I'll just read the script. Badlands Media is heading to Plymouth, Massachusetts with the 8th stop on the Great American Restoration Tour from May 1st to 4th. Don't miss out on the conversations and shenanigans. Get your virtual tickets today. This is going to be my first participation in a GART, so I don't know what shenanigans are happening. You'll have to brief me beforehand, so I'm prepared psychologically.
Absolutely. Will do.
All right. With virtual tickets, ensure you are part of the action wherever you may be. You will gain access to an exclusive GART chart to interact with other in-person and virtual attendees, get behind-the-scenes photos and videos, get to ask the panel questions so that you can be part of the live discussion. While many of our show hosts are at the conference, you may notice some changes to our regularly scheduled programming. Yes, sorry for that. Get your fix of Badland Media by purchasing your virtual tickets today. And if you can't watch live, don't fret. Replays of the entire event will be available to all ticket holders. Visit badlandsmedia.tv /events for details on both in-person and virtual tickets. All right. I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be fun. Cool. All right. So we can go in a lot of directions today, Gordon. Whether it's satanic terrorist organizations or whether it's international geopolitics or geoeconomics, where does your heart compel you to move this thing?
Let's start with the satanic stuff, because you mentioned that before. And I think I know what you're going to mention, because you mentioned it generally to me before we went live, but we didn't get into the specifics. But I wonder if it's this Ukraine thing. Well, I'm going to pass it on to you, because John and Zach did a pretty compelling show about this on Baseless Conspiracies the past 2 weeks. Yeah. They had Bix, BX is her name on X, and she's been researching this stuff for years, and even is in the Telegram chats with some of these people who have been groomed, and is in contact with them. She's become she's like a celebrity among these people. The satanic cults are aware of her and reach out to her and contact her. And also then you have FBI agent, former FBI guys like Kyle Seraphin, who used to be on Badlands, trolling her and basically threatening her because she's exposing this stuff, which is really weird.
What? Okay, I gotta watch an episode of this. Okay,
yeah, it's really, really bizarre. The whole situation is really bizarre, but that's kind of its own. That's its own little thing. I would encourage people to go listen to Baseless Conspiracies if they are interested in hearing that from her. She can give you a better insight into it. But yeah, I think this is what you're going to be talking about, these murder cults. But
yeah, probably. I guess so. But now you made me really want to dive into Bix, and that's wicked, weird, wild. And I'm going to check out the last episode of Baseless Conspiracies will give me a bit of a portal into that, or
it's the last two. So they had her on last week, and then stuff that the story broke,
Okay.
Like there were like new developments in the story, so then they had her back, and so she did like a follow-up episode this past Monday.
Fascinating.
I would recommend watching both, because you're going to get a lot of like just different stuff. You'll hear more about like the Kyle Seraphin stuff the first episode. And the second episode, she actually plays part of her documentary that she made about this, that's like extremely compelling. And it all ties to Ukraine. It all ties to Ukraine, and it's wild, man. It is it really puts the whole Ukraine-Russia war in like a different light.
Well, I actually made a little 9-minute video about a year ago that touched on some of this indirectly, and I didn't realize it at the time. Which I might maybe I'll even just play that. Who knows? I'll share what I have, and then we'll see where it goes. But definitely, this may not be new for a lot of people who are also watching Baseless Conspiracies. But basically, to recapitulate, if you don't even know what we're referring to, not that on April 12th, it was announced that a Wisconsin teen who killed his parents, his mother and his stepfather, was apprehended when he was he stole his stepfather's car, was moving. I think he drove through a stop sign without stopping. Cops stopped him and realized that he was he had his whole game plan somehow to kill the president. Not too sure how he was going to go about doing that. He had a 3-page manifesto calling for ushering in effectively like a new age almost, through some form of cataclysm, a great war. The idea was to then blame the murder on Russia and escape to Ukraine. It's really weird, and they allude in this thing that he lived with his dead parents for a number of weeks, I believe. They were killed in February of this year. He lived in the same house while their corpses were rotting, and then he decided to leave and engage in part 2 of his thing. Now, this guy is there's 2 things here. Number one, all of the mainstream coverage that I've seen make the point that he was being groomed, was being managed by different anonymous forces. They don't even say whether they're based in Ukraine, whether they're based in the USA. They so far, I haven't seen any details emerge publicly about that. Again, this kid's only 17 years old, right? But they do say as well that he is a member of an initiate of a satanic cult. And this satanic neo-Nazi cult is the Order of the Nine Angles. There's some speculation about what specifically are the 9 angles. Some say it's like a reference to the 7, because it's based on a Crowleyite initiation ceremony that involves the Eleusinian mysteries and the cult of Mithra revamped in a Rosicrucian Hermetic garb in the 19th century, when the Golden Dawn was retweaking a lot of these ancient pagan rituals. Crowley played a big role in a lot of that reformation, but it basically still brought about the Mithraic and the Eleusinian 7 chord degrees premised around the then 7 known celestial bodies of the moon and the 6 known planets that were known in ancient Roman times. Each one being a degree of initiation as you move to, purge yourself of your morality, whatever values were imposed on you without your personal will to power are supposed to be purged as you become effectively brainwashed to believe that you are God and you create your own reality in some weird, magician's ritual. So that, I looked at the Wikipedia site. There's a few things that jumped out at me just reading their pretty interesting Wikipedia coverage. It's a long entry. Number one is their logo, which people could see as a 7-pointed, we won't call it a polygon, a 7-pointed star on the right. That's their official symbol. They were created in England in the 1960s. It's kind of like wrapped in a bit of obscurity. Like there's some apocryphal stories about what created them, but it's all agreed that this guy David Myatt is currently the top intellectual sort of grand master of this very opaque international satanic network. He was initiated through something that in my research looks a lot like the the Process Church of Final Judgment. It's a Satanic Gnostic church set up in 1962 by two Scientologists that interfaced very closely with Charles Manson, with the Church of Satan, even, like I said, with some leading members of both Anton LaVey's program as well as Charles Manson's family, as well as Kenneth Anger, the Crowleyite, film director who made things like Lucifer Rising in the 60s, featuring Mick Jagger as one of the stars. He also featured Anton LaVey in one of his plays, and Bobby Beausoleil, who played a big role in the Charles Manson killings that killed Roman Polanski's wife, who was pregnant at the time. So you got this thing emerging out of England. The head of it is still this guy, David Myatt. And the thing that caught my eye was two things. So here, let me just change that for a second. That symbol is pretty important. Another thing I'll just say, when I scroll down that page on Wikipedia, it says here it's a hold on. It's tied to the it's connected. It's affiliated with another neo-Nazi terrorist organization called the Atomwaffen Division and the Temple of Blood. That's the Atomwaffen Division. Combat 18 and the Nordic Resistance Movement are two other neo-Nazi, all occult. They're all occult agencies that are embedded in the U.S., but also, like, the C-14 neo-Nazi movement in Ukraine is tied also to these groups, and members of these agencies have gone to volunteer since early on in the coup d'etat in Ukraine in 2014. There were already people being brought in from these neo-Nazi divisions. I think C-14 even says that their name itself comes from some line delivered by David Duke, U.S. For many decades he's been a leading U.S. neo-Nazi. Says here that they worship, one of the key deities is Baphomet, the Templar deity that the Knights Templar during the Crusades were worshiping, who's an androgynous deity of sex and destruction, sort of the unification of the sacred and the profane. And they say that it's basically a very close fusion of Baphomet with Kali, and they got a picture of Kali, the war sex deity of India there, that was featured in one of the Indiana Jones movies, The Temple of Doom, holding a severed head of a guy and a bunch of severed heads around her what do you call it? Her necklace, and a bunch of severed arms. That's yeah, if you can see that there, right? A bunch of severed heads. That's how Kali's always featured. Rotting, severed limbs around her belt, and she's usually standing on Shiva, who seems to be always portrayed subdued as well as drugged, with a serpent having bit him. Serpent venom just being part of the initiation rituals as well. So that's one aspect of this weird cult. So Atomwaffen SS, the Temple of Blood. They promote human sacrifice. It says here the Order of Nine Angles writings condone and encourage human sacrifice, referring to their victims as opfers. They outline different ways to find your human sacrifice. There's a few other things, but we'll just edit there. Now, the thing that really...
I always like to troll Nimarata Redhawa, better known as Nikki Haley. That's her real name. By comparing her to Kali. Basically saying she's like Kali in human form. Yeah.
She's probably hiding a couple of arms under her under her jacket.
I assume like you go into her office and like underneath her desk she like maybe in the drawer she has a couple like severed heads of like men who she conquered like in the political landscape. Yeah.
Yeah, I would not be surprised. These are some pretty sick puppies. And this guy David, here, let me get his name here. He goes by the name Anton. David Myatt. So this guy David Myatt, who's been running this thing since the 70s, he's been sort of the official head of it. He is pictured there in a Sufi garb, and he converted to Islam from 1998 until 2009 or so, which is an odd thing to do. One of the things that they have pointed out is that he was a promoter of Al-Qaeda. He was somebody who was helping to recruit people into terrorist outfits, Islamist terrorist groups. He was promoting the idea of, here, I should have taken note of where it is. Anyway, he was promoting the idea of just having all-out jihad against, Jews specifically, to wipe them out. And he saw this, he was promoting this idea of redemption through murder. One of his essays found itself on the website, the official website of Hamas's Izad ad-Din al-Qassam brigade site. So the official military branch of Hamas had featured one of his treaties on their site for a number of years. So this shows that he's not just playing a game. He actually has practical, real ideological influence within the radical branch of the Muslim Brotherhood that created Hamas itself and has been used as an asset of Mossad, of Anglo-American intelligence, for many, many years. So he's actually been doing that, while at the same time, it seems he's positioned himself to be a recruiter of a lot of useful idiots from the West to go into and get sent into the Middle East to carry out jihad as part of their own thing. They say somewhere here that I just want to read this as well.
Yeah, so it's like the fact that he wants to wage war against the Zionists. My leader in the clubhouse for people who most likely cultivated this asset would be probably Mossad. That's like their MO. I mean, if you go look at ISIS and Al-Qaeda have never attacked Israel. They've never. There was one time where they got into like a crossfire thing with the IDF in the Golan Heights. That was November 2016, and then actually the former defense minister of Israel, like at the time, he resigned or retired or left office. The following spring came out and admitted that ISIS had somehow contacted him through a back channel and apologized for shooting at their guys, even though 4 of the ISIS guys were killed in the exchange. That's the one and only time that ISIS has ever engaged with the IDF. It was a misunderstanding of mistaken identity, and then ISIS, after being killed by the IDF, got on their knees and apologized and prostrated themselves before the government of Israel and said, we're really, really sorry for what we did. So my assumption would be that this guy probably was cultivated as an asset by Mossad in a controlled opposition dynamic to justify war against the Arab neighbors.
I think you're right. I think that's a very solid hypothesis. Now, the other thing that I just wanted to read from the official Order of Nine Angles website is within the initiatory system of the Order of Nine Angles. I'm just reading this paragraph right here. There is an emphasis on practitioners adopting insight roles in which they work undercover among a politically extreme group for a period of 6 to 18 months, gaining experience in something different from their normal life. Among the ideological trends of that the Order of Nine Angles suggests its members adopt insight roles within are anarchism, neo-Nazism, and Islamicism, stating that aside from the personal benefits of such an involvement, membership of these groups has the benefit of undermining the Magian Nazarene socio-political system of the West, and thus helping to bring about the instability from which a new order, the Imperium, can emerge. And when they say the Magian Nazarene socio-political system of the West, that's their way of referring to basically Judeo-Christianity, like the entire Christian like matrix. They call it the Magian Nazarene socio-political system that they deem is evil and thus must be overthrown by doing things like human sacrifice, cannibalism, terrorism. Somehow they think that they're somehow on the side of angels when that's their position. And again, the encouragement to gain insight, to gain living, because it's true. Life is not an academic exercise. You have to do things. Now, the thing that they encourage their initiates to do is to go and find an extremist sect. And they make a point on this site, too, that it could be also eco-terrorism. There's a very influential Mexican eco-terrorist organization tied to this entity that promotes Theodore Kaczynski, aka the Unabomber, as their sort of guru, and that carries out, attacks on pipelines, infrastructure that they say is causing the destruction of ecosystems. So that's part of their MO. I wouldn't be surprised if the Deep Green Resistance Operation that was behind, the how to blow up a pipeline in that movie that Hollywood made a few years back. I would not be surprised if they're also tied to that thing. Or you could join a neo-Nazi terrorist movement, or you could join an Islamist terrorist movement. Whatever the case may be, you'll gain insight, right? It'll be a character building experience. Now, all of this to say, what brought to my attention, all of this plus that specific logo that you see there was from my documentary that I made a couple of years ago now, or no, it was 2023. I made this little 10-minute video with Jason Dahl, my filmmaker friend. And that logo is the same logo used by the Temple of Blood. That's one of the promotional tweets by promoting the Temple of Blood, and again, they admit directly it's tied to the Temple of the Order of Nine Angels, which was caught in 2022 as being run by a guy who was an FBI informant named Joshua Caleb Sutter. And from 2003 to 2018, Joshua Caleb Sutter, who was the head of the Temple of Blood and the Atomwaffen neo-Nazi group that is referenced in the Wikipedia entry tied to this Order of Nine Angles, received $180,000 from the FBI directly. $80,000 of that $180,000 came between 2016 and 2018. Now, there's a lot of people who try to say that terrorism is just this naturally, organically emergent thing. And again, whenever you scratch the surface of the narratives of any of these terrorist front groups, whether Islamic or neo-Nazi or whatever, you'll always tend to find in every case the hand of intelligence agencies grooming, deploying, paying for, providing instructions to how to make bombs and other things, those very same terrorists that we're told to give up our liberties in order to have Patriot Acts, mass surveillance, dragnets, or whatever, or bomb other countries to protect ourselves from these things that are caused by the same people telling us that they want to protect us. It's every single bloody time. So yeah, that's just what caught my...
It's the Hegelian dialectic, and that's interesting. Like everything you just said, it aligns with what Bix was saying on Baseless Conspiracies the other night. Connects a lot of dots, and you're absolutely right. I mean, they go and they cultivate this ethos, whether whichever is the most useful, depending on where they're deploying it. The neo-Nazi thing works in places like Ukraine and Eastern Europe. It works in the United States as well. The Islamicist stuff works in the Middle East, obviously. So, and then, of course, they go and they create events and they create psychological warfare operations through, narrative deployments through the news media in order to antagonize vulnerable individuals. And then they reach out to those vulnerable individuals by giving them a place to go to, like a platform or a website. And then that's where they start to groom them. And that's what Bix was talking about. She was saying that they're doing it now through like Minecraft, like the video game, targeting children. They're going into these apps because the apps all have like a chat feature, and they're basically targeting young kids and getting getting kids when they're like disaffected and teenager and hormonal and very, very impressionable. And when you look at those three groups that you just listed, anarchists, neo-Nazis, and Islamicists, those are all all three of those are very convenient groups that all kind of share a common enemy, so to speak, quote unquote. And that enemy, of course, are the Zionists. And I want to actually share this. I want to share this video real quick because I think this aligns with it. I've been talking about this for the past year and a half, ever since like October 7th. Even before October 7th, I was talking about it. But after October 7th, it became way more relevant because Glenn Youngkin, the governor of my state, was the first one of 39 governors to sign into law or to write an executive order, an expansion of the anti-Semitism hate speech laws. So anti-Semitism is already covered and has always been covered under existing hate speech laws, meaning if I go commit a crime and then they can prove that, anti-Semitism was a motive of that, it would be the same as me going to commit a crime where, hating black people, like if that was my motive, I would also be, you get the crime is then elevated to a hate crime, right? Beyond just like the normal crime. That's already been on the books for a long time. So now these new laws that they're implementing are based on definitions that come from the IRHA, the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. And the way the executive orders and the laws are written is it makes it fluid. So if the IHRA changes their definition, the law changes with it. And so at the time of all these things being passed, the laws or the definition said that, people who criticize Israel, who compared Israel to Nazi Germany, who said that that the Jewish elite killed Jesus, which is exactly what's written in the Bible. Like any of those narratives constitutes anti-Semitism. Well, now of course we see these people being targeted, and I'm not advocating one way or the other on these individuals that are being targeted for deportation from the United States. They could be innocent. They could be guilty. They could be intelligence assets. I don't know. And frankly, the evidence for why they're being deported, I don't think is being very widely disseminated. So I don't know why they're being deported. The claims is that they're espousing, pro-Hamas rhetoric, but I don't really see any of those videos or posts being like disseminated widely. So I don't know. But here's what I do know is that these people are being targeted because of their political ideology. I think that's very, very murky ground when it comes to the First Amendment, even though they're not U.S. citizens. I understand that whole argument. But listen to what this guy says. This is David Freeman. He was the U.S. ambassador to Israel under the first Trump administration, and he still is involved in the Trump administration, just not as as the current ambassador to Israel. Now it's Mike Huckabee. Listen to what this guy says. And the reason this got posted was because Candace Owens accused him of saying that Candace Owens should be arrested and deported from the country. And he came out and said, that's ridiculous. I never said that. And then so this person, Crazy Village Lady, said, well, we can just listen to the video and listen to what you say. So let's take a listen.
To many organizations, there are many people who commit their lives to it, and they're all very good people and have enormously good intentions. But a government can do in 2 months more than any organization can do in its lifetime. And so when we talk about the importance of a bipartisan fight against anti-Semitism, which of course I endorse, and I, as my predecessor said, I condemn anti-Semitism on the right and on the left. I'm an equal opportunity condemner of anti-Semitism.
You're alluding to Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, none of them are any good on the right. On the left, I don't like any of these anti-Semites, and I'm not shy about it. But the government, the United States government, or the government of France, or the government of any other country, has the power to rein in anti-Semitism in a much more effective way. And people say, well, the governments are not in the business of changing the way people think. That's true, but to my thinking, most people who are anti-Semites, most of these people running around, we're not going to win their hearts and minds because they don't have hearts and they don't have minds. So how are we gonna? There's no reason to think we're ever going to convince them, but we can deport them, we can put them in jail, we can make their lives miserable, we can cut off their funding, and that's what the Trump administration is doing for the first time.
Yeah. And so what he just said, for those who didn't catch everything he said, is that he's saying that these NGOs, they were talking about NGOs in this conversation they're having and what NGOs can do to basically rein in anti-Semitism. And he's saying, yeah, it's great. I mean, these organizations I'm involved in have been doing this stuff for decades, for generations. We've obviously haven't been very effective because anti-Semitism is growing right now, referring to the criticisms against the government of Israel. But he's saying, governments can do a lot more. Governments can deport people. They can throw people in jail. They can freeze their bank accounts. They can go after them. And of course, under this guy's version of anti-Semitism, I would qualify as an anti-Semite because I am very critical of the government of Israel. So according to him, he would look at me and say, this guy's an anti-Semite, freeze his bank account, arrest him, throw him in jail, deport him. I mean, deport the guy, I'm a U.S. citizen. And this is pretty scary stuff. And he's celebrating the fact that the Trump administration is already doing this to non-citizens. And so I think that's why we all kind of have to take a pause here, catch a beat, and be like, all right, are we going down a slippery slope here? Because right now they're targeting people who are quote unquote Islamicists, who in the public zeitgeist, in the normie zeitgeist, they are framed up as radical jihadi terrorists, right? Radical Islamic terrorists, or radical Islamic terrorist adjacent, right? It's not going to be very hard when you look at everything that Matt just ran through and everything that Bix was talking about on Baseless Conspiracies. It's not going to be very hard to make the leap from radical Islamic terrorists to neo-Nazis, right? Well, we're already doing it to the radical Islamic terrorists who are violent. I mean, these people, or at least they have the potential to be violent. They haven't gotten violent yet, but they might be violent. Now we should start looking at neo-Nazis, and then they'll start pointing to like the worst examples of that, right? And there are plenty of those out there, like the most cartoonish examples of that. But what have they already accused MAGA of being for the past several years, guys? They've accused all of us, even people who are not critical of Israel, even people who love Israel. They've accused all of us collectively of being Nazis. So you can see how like that's the attack vector, and you can see this, and it's all being ushered in by the Republican Party. This is not happening from the Democrats. The Democrats, some of the Democrats are behind it, and some of them are actually against it, obviously. But that's what I've been warning about for the past year and a half, is that the First Amendment is being besieged right now, not by the Democrats. I mean, the Democrats are doing that, of course. They have a different attack angle, but it's actually being rug pulled by the Republicans. The Republicans are coming from the First Amendment in a much more effective manner than the Democrats ever had, and they're doing it through the auspice of anti-Semitism and protecting Jewish people from Jew haters, right? And by Jew haters, they mean anyone who criticizes the actions of the government of Israel.
Yeah, well, and you even had it in against the truckers' convoy in Canada too. That's what Justin Trudeau said. Everybody who doubts or who's resisting the forced mandates are tend to be anti-Semites, fascists, and there's another one too. I forget another very, very negative slander. But pretty much anybody who's thinking critically becomes immediately labeled very easily a neo-Nazi, shill, or a fascist.
Well, and this is going to become a more effective attack vector for them as we evolve. As I think this all evolves beyond just the government of Israel and goes into the Jewish elite, like the Jewish cartels that obviously is in control of things like Hollywood. I mean, it's very, very obvious that there are very powerful oligarchs who identify as Jewish, who openly identify as Jewish, who have very nefarious programs that they're running. I mean, George Soros is obviously a very prominent one, but there are plenty of others. And you can't criticize these people, because if you criticize them, you get accused by guys like David Freeman of being an anti-Semite. And then he's like, we should freeze these people's bank accounts and arrest them. And again, this is coming from the Trump administration, and people need to be aware of it. They need to understand it. I have my theory of why this is happening. I've been pretty open about that. I think in the same way that the Biden administration have effectively destroyed the Democrat Party, the Democrat Party will never win another national election again, I think in my lifetime, at least in the foreseeable future, because their platform has been completely debunked. I think now the same thing is happening to the Republican platform. I think the Republican Party is being completely gutted, and people like Charlie Kirk and these shills who are out there. I mean, Charlie Kirk, the other day, there's a video circulating of him saying that Jeffrey Epstein was probably a Saudi asset.
I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, obviously the guy was a Mossad asset. Obviously he was being run by the intelligence services out of Israel. And yet Charlie Kirk, that shill, is talking about the Saudis. So we can't they want to shut down this conversation before it even happens. And the attack angle they're using is protecting Jewish people from Jew haters. But I think at the end of the day, the net end of all of this, like the end game of it all, for people who aren't even really invested in the whole Israel discussion, is just to take away your free speech, because it's not going to be hard once they absolutely lock in the criticisms of Israel and stopping the criticism against the Israeli government. It's not going to be hard for them to leap then to criticism of the U.S. government or criticism of Jewish politicians in the U.S. And then they extend that to just all politicians in general. So they find the fissure that people emotionally respond to, and then they exploit it, they expand it. And that's how they do it. And everyone needs to be just completely aware of this. And we need to be able to talk about it openly without people getting triggered one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you look at it, even, we're going at I was alluding to the FBI and broader intelligence apparatus, Anglo-American, Mossad. sponsorship and grooming of terrorists going back a long time. This is not a new thing. Look at the first World Trade Center bombing. That was revealed, and I think it was October 23rd, 1993. There was a New York Times. I guess the New York Times was a little bit less controlled. A little bit. There was some more cracks in the system back then, and they released the transcripts, or at least some of the selected transcripts of like 1,000 hours that were recorded between what's his name, Ehud Salam or something. I'm forgetting his name, but he's the Egyptian foreign military officer who was used as an FBI informant and operator to recruit and to provide the vans, the bomb making, everything to the network that was then deployed to blow up the World Trade Center the first time around in 1993. It happened, I think, in February of 1993 or something. 6 people died, 1,000 people were injured. And the guy was led to believe that he was an infiltrator, that he was supposed to map out and identify the personalities within the cell. And he started realizing, wait a minute, I'm recruiting them. I'm paying them the money. I'm giving them the educational videos. And he's got FBI handlers, right? And he started recording the conversations he was having with his FBI handler. And it was like 1,000 hours he records fully. And finally, after the bombing, he provides it to the media, and they actually cover it, amazingly enough. And it's demonstrated that because he was saying, like, now is the time to intervene. They're gonna do it now. Now's the time to do something. Our job is done. We got their names. And it's like and nothing happened. So it was smart that he did that. But coming in the wake of that was the Joe Biden omnibus crime bill, which was pushed in 1994. Joe Biden was the primary sponsor of this thing. It was rejected at the time by a slightly more competent Congress. I only say slightly more. But Joe Biden later on bragged that the John Ashcroft 2001 Patriot Act was modeled verbatim on his 1994 omnibus crime bill. That would have been and there's actual articles from 2001, from 2002, where Biden is bragging that Ashcroft, because back then it was the cool thing to do, right? Now it's political capital to say you're the one who's been championing the war on terror, who's been supporting the bombing of these terrorist rogue states like Iraq, which had nothing to do with 9/11 whatsoever.
Nothing to do with it. Yeah,
no,
absolutely nothing to do with it.
Lindsey Graham was working with Biden at the time as well. And you got Republicans, neocon libs, who are all working together to get the exact same effect of promoting a radicalized perversion of Islam in the minds of an American audience, to think that that's all Islam is this thing we've created, right, artificially, and then to bomb the hell out of countries that are actually trying to resist the New World Order in any way, whether it's Afghanistan was a weak country already. They'd been annihilated.
Syria comes to mind. Libya.
It's a big list, right? Lebanon, as well. Mm-hmm. Iran's always had a big target on its head.
Russia's the one. Russia's at the tip of the spear now, right?
Yep. So it is sort of what you're saying, and again, the FBI, going back, this is not even a new thing from the 90s. This goes back to COINTELPRO, right? Like the idea of creating domestic terrorist organizations. It was revealed already in the Church Committee hearings back in 1974 that when COINTELPRO, counterintelligence program run by the FBI starting in 1956, was launched by J. Edgar Hoover with the help of some officials within the CIA to infiltrate nationalist organizations, civil rights organizations like Martin Luther King, like Malcolm X's. This is what killed Fred Hampton, one of the most competent leaders within the Black Panthers, as they infiltrated it with radicalizers, provocateurs who would try to turn these organizations into extremist entities with weapons being provided by the FBI, in order to turn them from civil liberties organizations into things that could then be weaponized, or like the Weather Underground was another one of these things too in the 60s, setting up bombs in public spaces to bring awareness to American imperialism and to try to stop American imperialism. But it's like, you're doing this by killing civilians in America. Is that really the way you're going to fight American imperialism? But no, it's just going to justify people getting scared shitless and giving up their civil liberties to an increasingly captured state apparatus that is, overseeing the murder of John F. Kennedy, of Bobby Kennedy, and these other troublesome leaders. And this has been going on now for a long time in Europe as well. In Canada, we had the same thing. Our only major neo-Nazi organization in Canada, the Heritage Front, back in the late 90s, was caught having its leader, Brock, I forget, it's in my video, but as a CSIS agent, the guy was an official agent of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. He is the founder and the guy who ran Canada's primary neo-Nazi organization of the 1990s. It's like, it's just again and again, everywhere you look, it's the same thing. And often you'll find when you go even deeper, these black magic, satanic ideologues managing this shit show for some weird invocation of some new age of Horus or some new aeon that people like Crowley were calling themselves, the champion. Or Michael Aquino was saying he's the prophet of the age of Seth. Whatever the case may be, it's the same thing. Or Hitler was calling himself, the avatar of what's his name, Odin, of Odin, who was going to usher in the 1,000-year Reich, the 1,000-year age, effectively of Horus, of a new brilliant age that would first emanate through a purgative, violent cleansing of the sinful humankind who has to be purged of our heritage, of our traditions, in order to be reborn again anew as a new man. This Ubermensch entity, but it's pretty sick.
Well, you mentioned the Patriot Act, and the Patriot Act is one that I think everyone can really appreciate 24 years later, 23 years later.
Yeah.
Because identity politics was used to push that through. The identity politic being the target being radical Islamic terrorism, right? So everyone rushed to give up all their rights, not really understanding what we were rubber stamping. And now, of course, we've seen in the past 5 to 6 to 7 years that whole thing get inverted, and all the warnings of all the people, all the earnest actors at the time, from both the right and the left, who were trying to warn people of what this actually was going to happen, what was going to happen. They were saying, I remember I was only 13 years old at the time, and I remember people saying this is going to be weaponized against the American people sooner than later. Like, just wait and see. And here we are 20 years later, and this has 100% been weaponized against the American people. It's been inverted against us, turned against us. And it's all done under the banner of identity politics, whether it is, neo-Nazis or Islamicists or anarchists or whatever it is. It's like they love the labels. They love, because the labels have emotional stigmas attached to them that antagonize people and get the emotions running. And then when people get emotional, they abandon their logic and their reason, and they basically submit to authority because they want protection out of fear. And that's exactly what we've seen happen. It's absolutely disgusting. I saw people in the chat saying, how do we stop this without giving up our rights? And the answer is simple. You don't give up your rights. The people who are calling for us to surrender our rights should be thoroughly investigated, and all of their crimes should be exposed, and they should have the book thrown at them as traitors. And I mean, that's how you fix all this stuff. And the levels of treason are off the charts. But I did see Mel Gibson, who Trump appointed as like the special envoy to Hollywood or whatever to fix Hollywood. He came out and said yesterday that he wants the truth about 9/11 exposed.
That's good. That's very cool.
I think that's very timely. And here's why that's timely, because if we can, let's shift to the Middle East and shift to the Iran nuclear stuff.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. And then before we round it out, I want to say something about the Nazis in the EU who are trying to prevent any leader from actually participating in Victory Day in Russia. Yes. Well, there's a bunch of ironies, but I'm sure it'll all just fit together nicely. So yeah, let's shift to the Middle East.
The EU one is hilarious. Like, they are the EU is basically cutting off its nose to spite its face, and it's definitely going to collapse from a lack of support. But yeah, we will. Let's round it out there. So everyone, I think, is aware that the Iranian officials met in Oman this past weekend with U.S. officials. The conversations were said to be very productive. There's a lot of misinformation and conflicting narratives about what was done and what was said. What I understand, and I think John and I potentially are going to talk about this more tonight on Devolution Power Hour. But from what I understand, there's been some hubbub for weeks now that there's a rift forming in the Trump administration between the neocons, which would be Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz, Mike Huckabee. I mean, most of the cabinet, frankly, are neocons. And then these businessmen who are coming in and basically just being transactional and trying to like just get stuff done. And that would be Steve Wickoff, Adam Bowler, Mossad Boulos, who's Tiffany Trump's father-in-law. He's a Christian Arab. Tom Barak, another Christian Arab, who are coming in and like, hey, let's make peace with Hamas. Let's make peace with the Muslims, and like let's just stop killing each other. Like let's pivot to prosperity and pivot to we can all make money if we stop fighting, like stop killing each other, and we stabilize the region, and then we can get insurance companies to come in to place insurance policies on construction loans, which you can't get a construction loan. That was one thing Steve Wickoff was telling Tucker, which I've actually been saying that for a while, but you can't get a construction loan in the Middle East if you want to build a building. You have to pay cash for it because the banks can't get their loans insured, so they won't give the money out. So you have to stabilize the region so the banks will then give lend money to get secured loans to build this stuff. And if you're paying all cash on these construction projects, you're tying up all your capital at one time in a project rather than being able to spread it out and build more things at one time. So I think that's one of the strategies they're dealing with. So one thing that I've also been speculating on is that this Iran nuclear deal is not going to be what people think it is, that people think this is going to be about nukes. That's probably going to be part of it. I mean, there's probably going to be an element of that. But I really think what this is about is giving legitimate nuclear energy programs to the Muslim countries in the Middle East, which will then be expanded to other second world countries around the world. We've already seen Putin and Burkina Faso in Africa signed a deal recently that Russia's going to build them a nuclear reactor, and the neocons are livid about that.
Yeah.
As is Macron in France, because they want those people to remain poor and stupid. But so this is a story from the other day. It says, for those just listening, it says Saudi Arabia, U.S. on pathway to civil nuclear agreement. U.S. Energy Secretary says the United States and Saudi Arabia will sign a preliminary agreement to cooperate over the kingdom's ambitions to develop a civil nuclear industry. U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright told reporters in the Saudi capital, Riyadh, on Sunday. Wright, who had met with Saudi Energy Minister Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman earlier on Sunday, said Riyadh and Washington were on a pathway to reaching an agreement to work together to develop a Saudi civil nuclear program. It says right on his first visit to the kingdom as secretary as part of a tour of energy-producing Gulf states, said further details over a memorandum detailing the energy cooperation between Riyadh and Washington will come later this year. Quote, for a U.S. partnership and involvement in nuclear here, there will definitely be a 1-2-3 agreement. There's lots of ways to structure a deal that will accomplish both the Saudi objectives and the American objectives. A so-called 1-2-3 agreement with Riyadh refers to Section 123 of the U.S. Atomic Energy Act of 1954, and is required to permit the U.S. government and American companies to work with entities in the kingdom to develop a civil nuclear industry. And that's the key part right there. So under the U.S. Atomic Energy Act of 1953, you have to have a Section 123. And so I actually went and looked up what this was. Let me pull that up. And so I've dug into this before. And basically what this is it's like you grant these organizations that go in and inspect the facility, like access to your facilities, to make sure that you're not like secretly enriching programs, that you're following safety protocols so you don't have like a nuclear meltdown, that kind of stuff. That you're not like, taking some of the material off to the side and selling it on the black market, that all the norms of the industry are being followed, right?
Yeah.
And so what's interesting about this development is that, because now, let me just share this story real quick and then I can give my analysis. This is from the next day. Israel's Lapid, I think I'm saying his name right. It's either Lapid or Lipid, or I think it's Lapid, rejects U.S.-Saudi nuclear deal allowing Riyadh to enrich uranium. Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid today rejected any possible nuclear deal between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia that may allow Riyadh to enrich uranium, quote, Israel must demand from the U.S., our closest friend, that any nuclear cooperation agreement with Saudi Arabia explicitly prohibits uranium enrichment on Saudi soil, Lapid said on his X account. He said the Israeli government had taken the same position in 2021 and 2022 when he was prime minister, because he was prime minister for a short period of time after COVID. I expressed to the U.S. administration our firm opposition to any attempt to allow uranium enrichment in the Middle East. This is how it should be done now, Lapid said. Saudi state media, citing U.S. Energy Secretary Chris White, said that Washington is edging closer to a landmark energy partnership with Riyadh that could pave the way for commercial nuclear development in the kingdom. And this would align with what their Vision 2030 is. So what's interesting about this development is, number one, like, let's just look at like what's happening over the past few years here in the Middle East. So when the Houthis started attacking the ships going to Israel, right, and they effectively blockaded ships trying to go through the Red Sea to get to Haifa in Israel, they shut down Israel's ability to ship in goods that it absolutely needs in order to survive, because Israel does not have natural resources. It doesn't have its own industrial base to support itself. It has to bring in this stuff, particularly food. So what happened was Saudi Arabia MBS organized a convoy system. So the ships bypassed the Red Sea, went into the Persian Gulf, docked at Abu Dhabi in the UAE, and then they unloaded all the supplies in trucks and then drove the trucks across Saudi Arabia through Jordan into Tel Aviv. And as far as I understand, the kingdom paid for all that. Like, the Saudis were basically paying for all that. I mean, maybe some of the costs got passed on to Israel in some form, but that was like a goodwill gesture to make sure that the people of Israel didn't starve, which is effectively what the Houthis were doing to them. So what Lapid is saying here, and let's identify who Lapid is. Lapid is the Netanyahu opposition leader, meaning that he is anti-Netanyahu. He's the guy who's basically like, we don't want war, at least in this moment. Maybe they want war long term, but we don't want war with Hamas right now. Like, we want a peace deal. We want a two-state solution even. Like, we want to go back to where we were like October 6th, 2023. Even that guy is saying that there is no way on earth that Saudi Arabia is going to be allowed to have a nuclear program. Over his dead body, over Israel's dead body, is Saudi Arabia going to have a nuclear program? And the reason basically is that they don't trust the Muslims. Because Muslims cannot be trusted because they're Muslims, right? I'm pretty sure that if Saudi Arabia and MBS wanted the Israeli people to suffer and die, his opportunity for that to happen came and went. And he actually addressed it and fixed it and made sure that they had food and supplies and all that stuff, right? I mean, he has demonstrated like a goodwill effort to make sure that Israel was not starved to death by what the Houthis were doing down in the Red Sea. So I think Lapid's arguments are completely unfounded. I think they suggest a far more nefarious intent in the Israeli political spectrum. And it really reflects the same. I mean, what they say about Iran is how they feel, I think, about all Muslim nations in their region. It's not just about Iran. It's about all their neighbors. They don't want any of them to have nuclear, like civil nuclear programs, which MBS absolutely wants if he wants to become the leader in technology and become like a technology superpower and like a tourism superpower. You got to have nuclear power plants, power all that stuff. And then finally, I'll pass it back to you. The 1954 agreement, what's interesting about that is the one country in the world that has not signed any nuclear agreement with the United States is Israel. In fact, Iran, of all countries, has signed those agreements. And the proof is that the nuclear reactor that they do have, that they opened in 1975, the United States built that reactor for them because they signed the agreement. So all of these other countries have signed these agreements. They all have the agreements. The one country that's never signed it is Israel. And the reason it hasn't signed it is because doing so would force them to expose the fact that they stole a bunch of nuclear material from the United States. They have an illegal nuclear program of their own. They've developed weapons. They're said to have like 200 plus nuclear warheads that they developed from stolen material. All the things they accuse Iran of doing, they have actually done. And I think we're about to see all of that adjudicated as part of this Iran nuclear deal.
Yeah, and that's the Eisenhower Atoms for Peace initiative. That even as soon as I think Eisenhower recognized that he screwed things up a little bit by allowing for the overthrow of Mossadegh. He realized that was a bad maneuver. And I think he tried to make up for it. He resisted the Suez Canal. Supporting there was a lot of pressure for him to support Israel and the British and the French against the Egyptians during the Suez Canal crisis, and he said no. And he ended up siding with Nasser as well, which was a big deal later on. And with that came the idea that we're going to have atoms for peace. Instead of having atoms for war, we're going to use this technology to encourage other nations to leapfrog their technological capacities with the assistance of the U.S. We trained the first and second generation of Iranian nuclear scientists in the United States, gave them scholarships, and then sent them back with the assistance to build civilian nuclear reactors, like you said, due to them just agreeing to sign certain cooperative agreements. Egypt did the same thing too, and we still we stabbed both of those countries in the back pretty hard over the years, and it's something to see that now. On the one hand, Russia is picking up that torch, helping Egypt build, I think, 4 nuclear reactors that are under construction.
Yeah. And they've helped Iran maintain their reactor, because the reactors have to have their parts repaired. You have to otherwise the whole thing could melt down, right? So Russia's actually been helping them do that ever since we abandoned them. I mean, ever since the Ayatollah came in and we broke off relations with them. But exactly.
Absolutely. And then also another one I was thinking about too is South Africa as part of the BRICS. Well, South Africa they do have nuclear power, and they're the only country of all of Africa that has been allowed to develop nuclear energy, civilian nuclear energy. Not a lot, but they have a number of reactors in play, and that have been in play for a long time, but they were never built under Black Africa. They were always they were all pre-Mandela. They were all built during the apartheid. So it was okay for South Africa to have that technology to the degree that they were maintained by the apartheid white, the movement that was pioneered and steered by the followers of Lord Milner, Cecil Rhodes. As long as that was in play, it was okay. And then as soon as they actually tried to have a new nuclear reactor, the first one built since apartheid South Africa, when they actually put an effort into building a pebble bed 3rd generation advanced nuclear reactor in 2008, they put something like 80% of the funding that they paid towards this. It was I don't know, it was how much? 9.2 billion. Oh no, 1.8 billion dollars was the funding to build this advanced pebble bed reactor, and 80% of it was funded. And then the U.S. pressured South Africa, saying that they were going to threaten them with sanctions, cut them off unless they abandoned their program. They abandoned it. Then all of the employees who were trained building that thing, which today it still exists, it's been mothballed. It's 80% done, never produced any energy. It's been mothballed. And all of the engineers from South Africa who were building it all got absorbed by an American startup company, X Energy, in order to basically steal their technology, steal their innovations, and then use it for the empire under Obama.
You remember the speaking of stealing stuff, you remember when the tariffs came out 2 weeks ago, and the Israeli people were livid because they were like, what the hell? We dropped our 33% tariff against you. Why are you giving us a 17% tariff? And the Trump administration said, well, remember all that IP you stole from us? Yeah, we want you to pay us back. So yeah, the 17% tariff stands. Pay us back.
Yeah. No.
I mean, the IP theft though is so prevalent, and China's the one that always gets accused of doing it, and of course they certainly have, but they're just exploiting a system that's easy to exploit. I mean, if you have your hand extended, and I'm talking about U.S. politicians, and saying, give me money and we will give you access to our special access programs, the SAPs, those servers where you go and you log in and you get access to all the classified stuff. Give me money and I'll give you access to the SAPs and you can steal as much stuff as you want. Mm-hmm. Every country on Earth is going to line up for that. They're going to how much money do you want? So, I mean, that's the exploitation. And it's not just China. It's not just Israel. It's a number, any number of countries have done it. And the people who gave them access should face a traitor's punishment, frankly, because that's what they've done. They've engaged in treason. So when I look at, like, you and I have talked a lot about the like the green nuclear, or the green energy stuff, like the climate stuff, all of that, like the what's it called? Malthusian, Thomas Malthus, satanic cult idea that humanity needs to be culled down to like 500,000 people because, for whatever reason, to serve the agenda. But they're doing that by talking about the climate threat and all that nonsense. And hey, we need to denuclearize, we need to deindustrialize, we need to make it much harder to produce clean water, much harder to generate wealth, generate prosperity, and people will eventually stop having kids, black pill, and just die off. And it's funny because the whole green, like, left-wing agenda, to me, like, it's become very obvious now that the real vehicle to accomplish that is actually through the Republican Party, because what the Republicans, what the Zionist neocons are actually advocating for right now, and what I just went through with those articles, is they're saying that nobody should have access to nuclear energy except for the countries that already do. And those countries should not be building more nuclear power plants, because nuclear power is dangerous because it leads to nukes or whatever. And they continue to remain funded and gain public support by having this caricature way out here on the left, like AOC, who basically is like, we need to regulate the cow farts and we need to, put taxes on everything. So, that cartoonish thing. And so people look at her and they look at like that whole paradigm, and they say, well, the only people who can save us from the crazy people like AOC are the neocons like Lindsey Graham. So we should give all of our money and support to Lindsey Graham, and vote him into power, vote guys like him into power. But meanwhile, Lindsey Graham is against the proliferation of clean nuclear energy, which is a very cheap, very clean fuel source. And the question is, well, when you look over the past 20 years, the Republicans have had more power than the Democrats have in Washington. I mean, on paper, at least, right? You had 8 years of Bush, 8 years of Obama, 4 years of Trump, 4 years of Biden, and now 1 year of Trump, or, you're in your first year of Trump. So it's been equal, I guess you could say, but you could argue that the Senate and the House of Representatives have skewed heavily towards the Republicans, especially during the Obama years. So why then are we seeing a decrease in nuclear proliferation? Why are we seeing a decrease in energy production? Why are we seeing economies around the world tanking and everything shifting towards the Thomas Malthus model of population control? And the answer is because the Republicans, the uniparty, is the one behind all of it. And I'm sick and tired of pretending the Republicans are anything but treasonous devils.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big sickness and a trap that we all allowed ourselves, not all, but so many of us that have allowed ourselves to fall into this left-right game of controlled oppositions. And even the idea that politics is like a sporting match and you have to get behind your team, it's such a delusion that has been cooked up for us, and it's never been that way. Like there's always there's like, we talked about this a little bit, but I mean, just to reemphasize, it's been understood by the oligarchy that the human condition has a certain, like, there's limited aspects of the human condition that are very important, that express what makes us us, right? And there's, you can't say like what's more important than the heart, how we feel, or the mind, how we think, and it's kind of like it's not either or. It's like, how do you harmonize the development of both of those as a process? And if our mind is growing analytically, but with no tempering, no guidance by conscience, by love from the heart, well, you're going to create a technocratic, a seemingly intelligent, but cold-hearted utilitarian Malthusian who will only look at the material aspects of what a human system is, what any system is. They'll be very like intelligent at finding ways of mathematically measure, weigh, graph, chart, plot out future trends, based on what exists. And they will foresee, using mathematical, extrapolations of present trends into the future, certain crisis points that they could calculate relatively based upon the the tension caused by the increased amount of human growth, which tends to grow geometrically, while at the same time you could see that, well, food production only tends to grow arithmetically if you don't have technological progress, of course. If you just use, if you latch yourself onto one level of technological innovation and you don't move forward, you don't encourage new discoveries, and you just try to monopolize whatever resources, whatever knowledge base exists at that moment, yeah, that mathematical formula becomes kind of true, and you could foresee a carrying capacity crisis at some point in the future. And then, these mathematicians with overly, hypertrophied analytical brains will then be able to use that data to start mitigating future crises in the present by promoting wars, sterilization of the unfit, controlled famines, things like that, for the greater good of everybody ultimately. Because if we're overpopulated, we're all going to suffer together. So we might as well just make some suffer now in order for the future to be happy, whatever, right? So it's sophistry. Inversely, you can see how the oligarchy has been able to capitalize off of movements that are sprung around the over hypertrophied emotion at the expense of of the mind. So you have the Jacobin movement of France, right? The movement of the people, the peasants, the uneducated peasants who just want justice. They just want, equality, and they want to see some justice be imposed upon the rapacious elites that have been exploiting them and their grandparents for many generations. And it became a people as a movement who were organized by rabble rousers like Robespierre and others who tended to be very closely affiliated with Jeremy Bentham through various Freemasonic outfits, even receiving some of their speeches and funding from British intelligence during the French Revolution, in order to weaponize mass mob mentality to become a battering ram for the empire. And we see it in the Bolshevik Revolution. We saw a lot of useful idiots being deployed for the right reasons. They saw a lot of injustice in the Russian system. They felt a despair for the future, and they were manipulated to become a mob that could then be weaponized. And it's the same model that was used in overthrowing governments in Ukraine, or what's known as color revolutions in our modern era, sponsored by George Soros and USAID and NED, and we all know that story. But it's the same technique, and they use this idea that we'll create a right. It'll be utilitarian, logic based, and then we'll promote a left response, which will be emotional based. One will appeal to a wannabe elite, a Mustafa Mond type of class of either Straussian neocons or Klaus Schwabian technocrats. They'll have this Nietzschean Übermenschen ideology because they have the will to power, the ability to do the things that the weak man is not willing to do, like promote depopulation and a bit of necessary suffering of the weak, but it's needed. So they have the strength. And then inversely, but they have no heart, right? Their hearts have been crushed. Their ability to love their fellow man has been turned into hate. And inversely, then you have the hyper emotional mob, which has not been allowed to develop their analytical sides. So they become just, the victims of woke education to create activists who are deployed into Antifa or, Black Lives Matter riot movements, and they're not bad people. They hate imperialism. They hate injustice, but they don't have the mind power to understand how any of those things that they're trying to intervene on actually work. So all they can think to do is blow something up, light cars on fire.
Dude, yeah. I mean, obviously 2020 was a color revolution. That's very, very obvious. Yeah. It was done to get Trump out of office. But the really, really hilarious part is the hilarious irony is that if you are anti-colonialism and you are sympathetic towards the suffering of the black man from Africa, Putin is the one who's been going in there and driving all the colonial powers out and empowering the actual sovereign people who want to reclaim their self-determination and give them the ability to do that without handouts. Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso has been offered money from every authority on earth, and he's turned all of them down, including Saudi Arabia has offered him $200 billion. And he said, no, I don't want any of your money, because if I take your money, then you own me. And so I would rather be a poor country that figures it all out on our own, and develops partnerships, bilateral partnerships, where we both benefit from the situation with Russia and others, than, you know, just take your money and then you come back later and ask me for favors. Like, no, I'm not doing that. And so, but all of those people who like get trapped, like, who get sucked into the emotional rhetoric and are easily triggered into jumping on one side or the other of a controlled opposition dynamic where both sides are being controlled in most cases, they all hate Putin and they all look at the Russia situation, Russia. Like, we have to oppose Russia at all costs. We have to support Ukraine at all costs. We have to back Ukraine. Ukraine are the righteous actors here. And it couldn't be further from the truth, because at the end of the day, as Bix explained in really good detail on Baseless Conspiracies, these murder cults that are operating in places like Virginia, where I am. The FBI field office in Richmond is actually the one who put out like the alert to all the parents nationwide saying, you need to be watching what your kids are doing online, because that's how these people are getting groomed. And there are people on the ground in America who are trying to groom your kids through these chat rooms. And it's not like these are people based in Ukraine doing it. These Ukrainians are here in America doing it online. And that's coming from the FBI. And that came out between, I think, the first episode they did last week and the episode they did the other night on Monday, which is why she came back. And that's also that accelerationist story of that kid killing his parents came out.
Yeah.
But that like when all that gets fully brought out into the light, which a lot of us have known about for a while, not the specifics of that murder cult, but the fact that Ukraine is a huge like a central hub for organ trafficking, child trafficking, human trafficking, all that stuff. And that all has to do with the collapse of the Soviet Union and what happened in 1991 with the aluminum wars. Burning Bright and I did on Monday night on the Book of Trump, we did the origins of Vladimir Putin and how he went to war with all the oligarchs in Russia in the 90s. And then went to war with, like, he went to war, the oligarchs who came into power in the 90s and consolidated the resources under their umbrella, most of them being former KGB officers. When he came into power in 2000, he went to war with all of them. One of the biggest ones being George Soros, drove George Soros and the Open Societies Foundation out of Russia by 2003. They closed their doors and then spent the next 12 years progressively outlawing, like passing laws to outlaw NGOs, foreign NGOs, from operating on Russian soil. And then in 2015, explicitly just outlawed them. Open Societies was like the poster child of the whole legislation. They will never be allowed on our soil again. They are an illegal organization. I mean, effectively a terrorist organization. And they don't have they don't have all the problems that we have here. They don't have these issues of these, foreign cultures being brought in here and communities being copy pasted in the middle of America that are completely at odds with, American culture and have no interest in assimilating.
Yeah.
And it's not their fault that they got copy pasted here. It's that the fact that these massive multi-billion-dollar NGOs did that, brought them over and then plopped them right here in the middle of, Texas or Oklahoma or up in Minnesota. And, that's why I was saying last night on the show we did, I was saying that that's a big problem now with guys like Charlie Kirk, because Charlie Kirk will sit there and continue to forward the narrative that Putin is the bad guy and Putin needs to be fought at all costs. And I think that might have something to do with the fact that Putin is progressively getting all these other countries to pass similar laws outlawing NGOs from operating in their nation. And Charlie Kirk, of course, runs a massive multi-billion-dollar international NGO by the name of Turning Point USA, which I view as a very nefarious organization, because I don't think it actually advances the interests of MAGA or the American people. I think it advances the interests of the oligarchs who back it. So, and those oligarchs, by the way, aren't all American. Let's pivot to the EU though, because I think that kind of gets us to the EU.
Yeah, I think it does. You set that up very, very artfully. And before we do that, let's listen to a Goldco sponsorship, and then we'll do that. And then we have, I think, a My Pillow at the very end. So let's do Goldco right now. Here we are. No, I didn't do it. Try it again. There we are.
Yep, there you go.
All right, the last 4 years have put so much stress on American family finances. Help end the stress now and celebrate the golden age with President Trump by diversifying with gold and silver. Remember President Trump's first term? Gold increased by 55%. Don't wait. Diversify your hard-earned assets and buy your gold from Goldco, now with no purchase minimums. Goldco has been established as a top-rated precious metals company and a leader in the gold industry, providing white glove treatment for over 10 years. Their buyback guarantee assures you that if your situation changes, they will repurchase your metals at the best price, providing you with peace of mind. You may even qualify for up to 10% back in bonus silver. Visit badlandsgold.com to claim your free information and instantsilver.com/badlands to see how much free silver you can get. Find out the relationship between gold, silver, Trump, and you with the free report focused on Trump and your financial future. That's badlandsgold.com and instantsilver.com/badlands to take control of your financial destiny. All right.
Nice.
Thank you. All right. So there was a MyPillow thing too. Maybe I'll just, actually, I don't have the right MyPillow. So let's just wait a few minutes as I upload it onto our StreamYard because I forgot to do that. Here it is uploading now. So in about 5 minutes, I'll be ready.
Cool.
The pivot. Okay, so what you just said sets the stage pretty well. We're approaching two, I think, pretty important milestones or historical anniversaries. One of which being April 25th, which is known as Elba Day. Elba Day being the day where you had Russian and American troops famously meeting on the river Elba, which really was a turning point, consolidating the end of World War II, the defeat of Nazism. And it was there's photographs featuring a beautiful embrace of battle-hardened soldiers having fought amazingly. The Russians, themselves, having made them push through all the way to France and then into Germany, meeting with their American counterparts. They'd lost 27 million by that time, Russians, in the war, the Great Patriotic War, as the Russians call it. And the Americans had also suffered immense casualties too. I think it was about 500,000. 500,000, which is bad. I mean, but and proportionally a fraction of what the Russians suffered, but together they suffered together, they embraced. And that's an important holiday coming up. I'm actually going to be co-hosting or I'm helping Dr. Edward Lazansky with a major Elba Day event on April 25th that if people want to know how to participate in, listen to, they can send me an email. I'll give them the access to that. It'll be a live broadcast simultaneously from Washington and from Moscow. The other thing is May 9th being Victory Day. So the official victory celebrations over the defeat of Nazi Germany. Very big day in Russia, like a national holiday, as big as Christmas. And that's sort of been the organizing identity, I think wisely so, over post-Soviet Russia. And that Putin really made sure that was going to be the focus, because it's like, what is the Russian identity? If you're not communist, what are you? And this is after Gorbachev, pulled the plug in a very messy, disgusting way on behalf of some very, very bad interests in the West back in the early 90s. But the question was, okay, well, what are you now? Are you like free market capitalists? Is that what Russians are? Well, that was tried. Everyone was given these little vouchers. All of the Russians, and they were told, now you can invest those. You can invest your vouchers to become investors, like Americans are. And the Russians didn't know what to do with these things, and they were starving. They knew that they were hungry, and so they're like, well, I'll sell my voucher because Khodorkovsky and other Harvard-trained oligarchs are like, well, we got some money, we'll buy your vouchers, and they started buying millions and billions of vouchers from the newly freed Russians. Who are they just want to buy some eggs and milk.
We talked about that on the Book of Trump, and so what it was is the voucher. Each voucher was worth like the equivalent like $25.
Yeah.
The Russian people were not like deeply educated in capitalism, so they didn't really understand it to the degree that I think the average American might appreciate like investment. But more importantly, they needed like food now. Like they didn't need something that was going to mature. Like a long-term investment that was going to mature over many years. They were less interested in that. So these oligarchs who came in, and again, many of them were KGB officers who had access to intelligence and understood the grander scheme of like what was happening, came in and bought these vouchers from all of these Russian peasants effectively for pennies on the dollar. They consolidated all the vouchers. They invested them in these these companies that had access or control of the raw materials and raw resources, primarily aluminum and rare earth minerals. That's why they were called the Aluminum Wars. But Khodorkovsky was one of them who had that company, Yukos, I think it was called Yukos. And what's interesting is that Khodorkovsky was eventually prosecuted under the Putin government. He was exiled out of Russia. He went and lived out his life in Switzerland. And it was actually the investigation into Khodorkovsky that led in 2003, November 2003. I read the article like online that night. That led to the Russian authorities going into the Open Societies Foundation, raiding their offices and taking all their stuff and saying, hey, we actually think George Soros was a part of the Khodorkovsky like network. And so that's why we're raiding your office and taking all your stuff. And that's why Soros left Moscow and never went back, is because he was accused of being involved in the Khodorkovsky like scandal. So interesting, like little overlay there. But yeah, like some of the big oligarchs, one of them was Khodorkovsky. Another one was Oleg Deripaska. Oleg Deripaska is the guy who is accused more recently of setting up Paul Manafort in the Russia gate. And Burning Bright played a really great video from like 10 years ago of, maybe it was like 5 years ago, of Putin going and meeting with all these oligarchs and basically just like whapping all of them on the wrist and being like, you pieces of shit, I can't believe you're enslaving, like the conditions that you're making these people work in. And he forced Deripaska to like a humiliation ritual, like sign over a bunch of stuff to him, and just totally humiliated Deripaska. And I think the prevailing understanding is that was Putin making an example of Deripaska and like showing all the other oligarchs, if you don't get in line with what I'm trying to do, you're going to suffer. Because a lot of them were trying to subvert what Putin was trying to accomplish.
That's the famous "Give me back my pen" video, right?
Yeah. As soon as Deripaska signs, he tries to walk away and he says, "Give me my pen back."
Yeah. Oh, that's glorious. Yeah, another guy too is Anatoly Chubai, who is the guy who brought in the World Economic Forum with Gaidar, Yegar Gaidar. Together, both those guys literally brought in the World Economic Forum Davos into St. Petersburg in 1998, and then 2009 they really amplified it. And it's these two guys who together, Gaidar ended up dying, and Chubai ended up escaping to avoid jail. He basically ran off to Turkey in 2022 and jumped ship. But hugely, these guys are like immensely influential, all directed by Western intelligence the entire time. And yeah, they just created an entire block of a deep state. There was already a Russian deep state, but they like created the modern incarnation of the deep state. That Putin's done a pretty good job. He's not finished. It's still a war inside of Russia to like purge this thing.
For sure.
But yeah, I mean, it's like the question was always like, how do Russians identify themselves? What is the cultural identity coming out of communism? It's okay. This globalized capitalist thing isn't working out. That's a fraud. So what is it? Well, Great Patriotic War. We are the eternal victors of the Great Patriotic War. That's a good one. And it is a good one to build on. So May 9th is a very important celebration. There's a lot of pressure. I'd still love to see Trump announce last minute that he's going to just show up. I'd love that. It would be great. Yeah. Xi Jinping is going to be there. Modi's going to be there. There's a number of world leaders who will be there, rightfully so. But what's her name? Kallas, the Estonian vice president of the European Commission, gave a threatening speech to, I think, Slovakia, and especially it was directed at Alexander Vučić of Serbia, when she said this.
Any participation in the 9th of May parades or celebrations in Moscow will be not taken lightly on the European side, considering that Russia is really waging a full-scale war in Europe.
So this is just gloriously ironic that this is the representative of a nation that or a continent, Europe, that was saved by Russia from Nazism. That's the reason why the Nazis didn't win, was principally because Russia fought 90% of the German Wehrmacht. 90% of that pain was taken by the Russians, who came in and liberated Europe. And that very celebration that liberated her society, she is saying, is not to be tolerated by any European member. And again, she's specifically threatening Vučić, who said he's going to go and has just suffered and avoided. He actually put down a Western color revolutionary attempt to overthrow Serbia, as we went through with Joaquin Flores a couple of weeks ago. That Serbia's been able to stay intact, and now he's going, and Serbia is not a part fully of the European Union, and so she's saying you're not going to be allowed to come in if you end up going there.
Great.
Well, great.
Wonderful.
Yeah. That's
Wonderful.
the Titanic. I get to avoid a joyride on the Titanic. Yeah. Okay. Sure. What do you got there?
Yeah. Well, here's just a headline that the guy I was talking about earlier, Ibrahim Traore, who, took control, I think, in 2022 in Burkina Faso through like a military coup, threw out the military junta that had installed himself the year before on behalf of the French intelligence services and the CIA. He has accepted the invitation, so he's going to be in Moscow as well, which is funny because he was also invited to Trump's inauguration and turned that down. And I imagine he turned that down because he was probably worried about being assassinated, but maybe he feels a little safer here. But yeah, and then to your point, here is from RT, the EU is pressuring Serbia's Vučić. Is that how you say it?
I call him Vučić, but I don't know.
Vučić, yeah, Vučić, not to visit Moscow. So they're telling him not to visit, and there's the story. They're doing the same thing to Robert Fico, where Robert Fico is like, I'm going. Like, why wouldn't I go? I mean, the EU is obviously the one who tried to kill him, shot him in the chest 5 times last year. And by the way, the reason he got shot in the chest 5 times last year in May is because he passed legislation that was called Kremlin legislation, Putin legislation. If you are an NGO that accept where more than 20% of your funding comes from outside of Serbia or Slovakia, rather, you're forced to publicly disclose who your donors are. That's it. That's all it is. But that would be so detrimental to the politics of Slovakia because obviously Slovakian politics, like many other countries, is controlled by external forces. Probably the CIA, probably Mossad, probably MI6. They couldn't afford for that to happen, so that's why they tried to kill him. Many such cases, by the way.
Absolutely, yeah, and you can just see this. The where, like, who represents the real Nazism in action, right? It's coming directly from these people who are calling all of their opponents Nazis, but they're the ones who are actually shutting down all opposition voices. They're pushing for the jailing of democratically elected people who, like Marine Le Pen, would become easily the prime minister of France in a second, or the president of France in a second, or Călin Georgescu, who would immediately become the president of Romania if he was given an honest chance, or the Dodik from the Republic of Spirska would immediately. I mean, this guy is the active leader of Spirska, democratically voted, and yet you have an unelected Viscount from Germany installed, telling him that he has to go to jail and isn't allowed to run anymore because he wants to be friends with Russia. That's the only reason why Bosnia-Herzegovina has been kept out of joining NATO up until this point, is because of the veto of the Republic of Spirska, the autonomous republic within Bosnia-Herzegovina. You have all of these displays now where they're trying to overthrow, utilizing the premise of democratic proletariats, calling for oh yeah, there you go. You got the deputy prime minister of Serbia as well. Oh, it's this Trump aides clash.
Yeah,
on trusting Moscow.
And so this is where, like, hopefully this is what John and I are going to talk about on DPH later. But this is what I mentioned on last night's show, and I've been talking about this a little bit here and there. But earlier I mentioned there's a rift occurring in the Trump administration between the neocons, like the political establishment, the Marco Rubio, Mike Huckabee, Mike Waltz on one side, and on the other side you have the businessmen who are more transactional, who are interested in actually, like, making peace in the Middle East, making peace in Eastern Europe, making peace with China, right? But that's not good for business, and it certainly is going to overthrow the status quo if this multipolar world order is allowed to emerge. And so I think that's what this article is detailing, is that on one side you have Rubio and Waltz and these neocons who really have come to despise Steve Witkoff, because Steve Witkoff has come in and undercut them and demonstrated that if you just reach out to the other side and talk to them and have dialogue, earnest dialogue, you can find common ground and negotiate peace. But of course, the neocons don't want peace; they want war, and that's what I think is going to be exposed here. And hopefully it becomes clear to everyone that the Republicans are the enemy. Ultimately, they're just as evil and sinister as the Democrats are. It's just a different branding.
Yeah, I mean, I want people to really, just internalize the fact that there are occultists that are behind this very strange, ambiguous term that's been generated over the past decade or so, deep state. Deep state's it's a fine word to use, but it's not specific enough in my mind.
It's very cutesy. It's like a cutesy little label that doesn't really define what it is.
Yeah, right? Like the bureaucracy, the whatever. Like it's so many. It could be different
Uniparty
things to different people.
Uniparty is a much more effective label. I mean,
I think so too.
At the very least, it like communicates what it is, which is like. And the sad part is that a lot of people in MAGA will talk about the Uniparty and use the word Uniparty, but then as soon as like Mike Waltz gets up there and starts talking about bombing countries in the Middle East, they start waving the American flag and they're like, yeah, let's go kill all these people. It's like, guys, you're getting sucked back into this stupid paradigm. We should be turning our focus inward and hunting traitors inside of our government, not hunting boogeymen on the other side of the world.
Yeah, I know. Like you look at it the way, it's not like this can't be done. This has been done. Like when, Xi Jinping has been able to put literally like 4.9 or 5 million people from his own party into serious punishment. Some of them have faced jail terms, death penalties, and we're talking like former heads of the Chinese security intelligence apparatus. 2 former heads of like the Chinese CIA have been given like 18-year sentences. The former governor of the Bank of China was given a prorated death penalty, basically for being part of an international deep state complex designed to subvert the aspirations of China as a civilizational state. So it's been done. Putin was able to showcase how can you go about organizing a purge of this whole fifth column operation that's been built up inside of your own society. You could put them in jail. You could do a variety of things. We've got examples of that throughout history too. Not enough in the West. I think we've tolerated too often the existence of this satanic agency, because at the heart of, when you look at the inner echelons of the FBI from the get-go, you have to deal with the highest echelons of the Scottish Rite Freemasonry. That's been the case from the very beginning. That's why even like there's a shrine to Albert Pike inside of the FBI headquarters. That's still a shrine right next to the replica of J. Edgar Hoover's office. Albert Pike being the Grand Master of the Southern Rite, the Southern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite, who was behind the entire Luciferian underground that made up the Knights of the Golden Circle, right? That paramilitary 80,000 man secret force that became later on the KKK, the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. Kuklos being the Greek term for circle, right? So it's a direct reference to the Golden Circle earlier that had aspired to create a slave empire with a special relationship to the British Empire, that was behind, that was working with the northern branch of the Scottish Rite, that was also behind the radical abolitionists, that like John Brown, who would go up and shoot up Harper's Ferry as a terrorist for the sake of, got to end slavery. So let's shoot up a bunch of people. Is that the way you're really going to do it? Mm-hmm. Well, let's see who that's going to assist. Well, maybe those who want to break apart the United States in a divide to conquer tactic with a controlled left-right opposition, maybe they'll be happy with that. So I think when you look at this occult hand that's tied to these United Grand Lodge freaks, a lot of them are tied directly to fanatics, who have their idea of rebuilding Solomon's Temple, who have been practicing Royal Arch Freemasonry for centuries. This is what created the state of Israel as a synthetic construct, as a synthetic nation going back to the 19th century. And this is the thing that's been grooming also radical Islamist groupings. Like you and I have talked about the origin of Salafism going, that is tied from Jabal al-Din al-Afghani. Same guy who was directly tied to British intelligence in the 19th century and the esoteric section of the Theosophists these different Crowleyite black magic circles that ended up reshaping British grand strategy after the Civil War in America. That was the same thing, creating both radical Zionism, Christian Zionism, as well as fanatical Islamicism, that all became different aspects of the same ultimate thing, and has been used to keep nations destabilized, to keep nations from cooperating on common projects that would otherwise benefit world peace, the lives of their grandkids, all of these things. So it's the same formula.
Created the Muslim Brotherhood in 1928 after in Cairo, after failing to infiltrate the original Muslim Brotherhood, which then had to be destroyed by its creator, Ibn Saud. Because originally it was a Saudi organization, and then once it was corrupted by the British, he was forced to create another army and destroy it. And then they went and created a new iteration of the Muslim Brotherhood in Cairo. And Nasser, you mentioned Nasser earlier. Nasser, when they took control of Gaza after the after the Nakba in 1948, when Egypt became the protectorate of Gaza and Jordan was the protectorate of the West Bank, Nasser said anyone caught pushing Muslim Brotherhood ideology will be executed. Like zero tolerance for it. And that was the case up until the IDF invaded Gaza in 1967 in the 6-Day War, and they took control of it. And as soon as they did that, they then flipped it and they said, you know what? We're going to be tolerant. Let's let the Muslim Brotherhood back in. So they let the Muslim Brotherhood back into Gaza. And then, of course, what happens? You get Hamas. And that's exactly what they wanted. They wanted Hamas because Hamas then engages in militancy against the IDF, and that then justifies wars and the ultimate annexation of Gaza into the Israel border.
Yeah, absolutely. No, dude, it's so. And then you look at Muslim Brotherhood when it was being overseen by Haj Amin, and I know we got to go. I just looked at the time. Okay, so actually, let's just say that when the Muslim Brotherhood was being represented by Haj Amin, the same Haj Amin who was the British installed Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. That Haj Amin is the guy. There's all these photographs of Haj Amin and Hitler hanging out and doing the Nazi salute in Germany. That was the guy who was, yes, collaborating with the Nazis, trying to create a pro-Nazi Arab force against Judaism, while at the same time you had the Havara Agreement being negotiated between the British Empire and Germany, Nazi Germany in 1933. That was what created all of these Jews. How did 80,000 Jews get that startup to go to the Middle East? The biggest movement of Jews into the Middle East didn't just come from anti-Semitism in Europe. That helped.
And they came from the Ukraine, which is not just modern Ukraine, but when I say the Ukraine, I mean the borderlands of Russia, which extend all the way up to Poland. And, it's like that. That's where they all came from. They all came from the Ukraine, because Israel was, of course, a Ukrainian colony. It was a colony. All the colonists there were Ukrainian.
Yeah, and Stefan Bandera and these other hardcore Nazis, they loved helping out with that. You just raise a few Jewish towns, do some murder, torture, kidnapping campaigns like they did in Operation Condor later on in South America. They were already doing that. You terrorize the hell out of the Jews living there, and then all of a sudden they want to leave, and you make it very easy all of a sudden to provide funding, other things to just get them out. You're like, oh, your life is unbearable for you in Ukraine. Well, here, let's help you, says Hitler. To go now, or Eichmann at that time was in charge of that. Eichmann, who was a big Kabbalist, let's go help you live in the desert as part of some, grand invocation ritual. And then we find that Otto Skorzeny, one of the top hitmen assassination chiefs under Hitler, that's Skorzeny and Hitler right there, becomes a Mossad hitman. He gets recruited by the Mossad, and Mossad is like hiring all of these unreconstructed Nazis who are now working with Alan Dulles and MI6 during the Cold War to oversee and train the Israeli forces, carrying out all sorts of things against the. So it's again,
his targets, by the way, are all like former Nazi scientists who are working for like the Egyptians and pro-Soviet nations, right, to develop nuclear energy and like new technologies. And so he's going out and he's killing his own countrymen who he used to be friends with. He's murdering all of them on behalf of Israel.
It's hilarious. It's sickly hilarious. So let's do this. Maybe let's run out with a MyPillow ad. And if you have any pressing comments or reads,
I have some rants. Yes, let's get the pillow ad, and then we'll do the rants and get out of here.
Okay. pillow it is. Here we are.
You're still looking good.
I'm still feeling good. You know, I've got all your MyPillow products. Mattress topper, bed sheets, MyPillows, towels, slippers, blankets.
I'm interrupting this commercial to do something I've never done before. Get 2 MyPillows absolutely free on orders of $100 or more. I can't do this forever, so get on board with this great sale today. Our best-selling 6-piece bath towel sets or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Our famous standard MyPillows only $14.98. Queens $18.98. King size only $1 more. Body pillows $29.98. Multi-use MyPillow 2.0s with pillowcase $9.98. Save $40 on our spring percale and Giza Dream bed sheet sets. Any size, any color. So go to MyPillow.com or call that number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all MyPillow products. And when you spend $100 or more, get 2 standard MyPillows out.
All right. Thank you, Mike Lindell.
It just ends. That same commercial ends up ending at the weird same spot, eh? Without finishing.
Strange.
Yeah. Anyway, it's okay.
All right, so we got some rants. Rumbling 1961, $25. My favorite show on Badlands. Thank you for an intelligent presentation and conversation. Thank you, Rumbling. Appreciate the support. Kara Maga, $5. Great show. Thank you, Kara Maga.
Thank you.
Kara Maga again. My favorite Badlands show. Thank you again, Kara Maga. Appreciate the support. Crane Op 59, what's up, Crane? $17. Been listening, doing work. So nice to be back. So nice back in school at 65 years old. I learned so much new stuff to me from you. Too much more than weekly rehashed news. Kudos, Matt and Gordon. I appreciate it, Crane.
Thank you.
Hope to see you soon, man, at one of these guards. Yeah. So thank you, everyone, for listening. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please hit the thumbs up and share this around to people you know. And yeah, we will see y'all next week. Like I said, I'll be on Devolution Power Hour tonight with John. You can check out the Badlands Substack. Matt's been publishing a lot of stuff recently on the Badlands Substack. I write for the daily Badlands News Brief. And I'll probably try to get an article out here soon. And then I'll do my geopolitics show at 2:00 this week. I'm doing my show 2:00 on Friday. So starting now, moving forward, my show's going to be at 2:00 on Friday, so I can go over an hour and not step on the Maha News guys' toes. And then I'm going to be on Badlands Daily this week on Friday instead of Tuesday. So, yeah, man, is there anything you want to plug in terms of podcast?
Yeah. I do want to plug one thing. I just released episode 2 of an ongoing series, The Dystopic Mission of Mark Carney. This one's on green bonds and oligarchs. The previous one was on Maury Strong. It's only 9 minutes long. I'm making a bunch of these tight, punchy things. I want these things to get more play, though. So if everyone could go to CanadianPatriot.org or my Substack, if you have it, it's MatthewEhret.substack.com. You'll see it right up front. Watch it, help share it. I want to bring more awareness to the series. And we're going to be producing episode 4 of The Hidden Hand Behind UFOs. It's a big one. It's going to be on the creation of a modern legend with Roswell. So it's going to be completely taking apart the whole Roswell modern myth from the earliest point to the present, from the 40s to the present. So that's going to be a big one coming out in the next few weeks. So keep an eye on that. And last thing, if people do want to tune into the Elba Day event, that'll be streaming live, send me an email at CanadianPatriot1776@tutanota.com. And I can send a link for people to tune in and listen to the live stream.
Awesome, man. And plug if you could drop the link to that Mark Carney video in the comments, and then I can help get that amplified hopefully through Badlands. So, yeah, man, awesome. Well, sounds good. Appreciate it. And why don't you be the one to click the end stream button, and we'll get out of here.
All right, end stream. Bye, folks.